Norman questions his choice of milk. I mean, there's so many options. You got different animals and percentages, and then people started squeezing nuts and getting milk out of them.
That's what I love.
These nuts.
Hey there, friends. Welcome back to ReddX, your source for the freshest daily cringe content anywhere on the internet. Promise. Swearsies, it's just a fact. It's totally science. Go ahead, look it up. Thanks so much. I've got wifey and baby sleeping in the room, so we're going to do something a little more toned down today. And it's going to be Life of Norman, as was requested in one of the live premiere chats. Can't remember who it was exactly. Can't say it rightly matters. I'm delivering the goods. So let's get into it. Norman feels included. Oh, best feeling in the world. There was a new coffee machine at work. It had been placed in the break room, right where the old coffee machine used to be. Someone had thought up a silly prank and had put up a sign next to the new coffee machine stating that it was voice activated and included a list of instructions. Norman did not realize that this was a prank. Like most mornings, Norman waited until the break room was empty before taking his morning break. Then, when he went to make a cup of coffee, he noticed the sign. What will they invent next? Thought Norman. Norman said politely, "I'll take a small decaf, please." Nothing happened. "I'll take a small decaf, please," repeated Norman. Still nothing. Unsure of what to do and not wanting to offend the machine, Norman returned to his desk without his usual coffee. That's not a fun prank.
No, thank you. Too late for me to drink coffee.
That's all it takes for Norman to give up? Come on. Where's your gumption? A short while later, Norman heard Charlene from HR's shrill voice loudly proclaim, "One venti latte with soy milk." A few people chuckled. Norman joined in. It's nice to be included, thought Norman. It really was an exciting morning at the office. Yeah, but you didn't get your coffee. I guess it's decaf. He doesn't need the caffeine. That's what all the Diet Cokes are for. Next one. Norman gets a text message. It was 2:34 a.m. on a Tuesday, and Norman was fast asleep in his bed. Suddenly, he was awoken by a sharp ding sound that he didn't recognize. Startled, he sat up in bed and looked around the room. He noticed his cell phone glowing as it sat charging on his dresser. "We've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty." Confused and perturbed, Norman got out of bed and walked across the bedroom to check why his phone had made this noise. As he stumbled towards his phone, he considered using the outlet next to his bedside table in the future. When Norman got to his phone, he saw that he had a message notification. Norman was surprised because he never gets text messages. He tried to recall when he received his last text message, but he couldn't. You know they have a history, you could check it. Never mind. He probably doesn't know how to check it. Who would possibly send me a text message in the middle of the night? Do they know that I have to wake up in 4 hours? Norman asked Norman, who sat squinty-eyed on his cat perch in the corner. Curiously and somewhat nervously, he opened the text message. "Amber alert, plate HHG 5509, Pennsylvania, white Toyota Camry 4-door. Norman's heart sank, and he felt extreme guilt for questioning the urgency of this text message. Now Norman was wide awake, and he began considering his options. He tried to recall CSI episodes of kidnappings. After 5 minutes of consideration, Norman realized that he didn't have enough information to really do anything. He laid back in bed and repeated the license plate number in his head so that he could be on the lookout tomorrow. Yeah, totally, Norman. Let's hope the kid lasts till tomorrow, huh? Norman didn't get any more sleep that night. He got out of bed 4 hours later to get ready for work. On his way to work, Norman noticed 5 different white 4-door cars, but didn't believe any of them to be a Toyota Camry. Feeling somewhat disappointed in himself, Norman sat at his computer and opened its web browser, whose homepage was set to the local news station. He read the headline, "Missing Girl Found." Norman was very relieved, and he felt a huge weight off of his shoulders. He smiled and thought, about how great this day had started out. What a burden for you to carry around, Norman. This shouldn't all be on your shoulders, man. Next time you get an Amber Alert, let me know. We'll go looking together, alright, bro? Let's get into the next story. Norman treats himself. Norman reached out, but hesitated. His hand hovered for a moment before retreating back into his pocket. He wasn't sure. He'd been saving his money lately and had been very responsible. He had saved $78 last month alone. Plus, he found that quarter on the ground yesterday, so why couldn't he splash out a little? He scrutinized his options and sighed. "Like, excuse me," said an annoyed voice from behind. "Sorry," said Norman as he stepped aside. In all his concentration, he didn't even notice the woman had approached and that he was now in her way. She passed and gave him a look. He stepped forward again and continued to weigh up his options. To hell with it, he thought. Norman reached out and gripped the more expensive 3-ply toilet tissue with conviction. Oh, that's so... you deserve it. He placed it in his shopping cart and moved forward with a stride in his step and a cheeky smirk. He barely even noticed the squeaky wheel on his cart anymore. Some things are priceless, Norman. I'm sure you know that already. But if you don't already, I'll reiterate, the good toilet tissue's worth buying. Priceless. Norman stops at a red light. On his way home from work one afternoon, Norman found himself pulling up to a stoplight at an intersection. He wasn't really late for anything in particular, so he didn't mind the delay. He glanced in his rearview mirror to see another car approaching, and it settled into the lane next to him to turn right. Norman appreciated music and liked to have the radio on while he was driving. When the car pulled up next to him, he turned the radio down so as to not be a bother. Both cars' windows were rolled up. But you can't be too careful, thought Norman. The light turned green, and Norman continued home. Was Norman listening to some gangster rap? Is that the real reason they turned it down?
Got my pistol point cocked, ready to link shots non-stop until I see your monkey ass drop.
You were scared to be a judge for your music, weren't you? I remember one time I was sitting at this red light and I was playing Fear. New York's All Right if you like saxophones, and they're in like this dissonant saxophone solo, and this car rolls up next to me and I'm just bumping it, and I looked over and smiled. And now you all know that I've been a weirdo way before this YouTube thing. But Norman, he's one of the good ones. He's a good egg. Maybe the best of all the eggs. Anyway, next one. Norman tries a new brand. Norman was in the supermarket one Sunday morning. After placing a package of paper towels into his cart, he pulled his shopping list from his shirt pocket. As he ran a line through pea towels, Norman noticed that he had forgotten to find oatmeal. Lucky I remembered, he thought. Breakfast tomorrow would have been an adventure. Norman pushed his cart over to where the oatmeal could usually be found, but the shelf for the unsweetened original flavor was empty. Ugh. Norman looked at the shelves above and below. Fruit medley and cinnamon sugar. Fruit was too tart for Norman in the morning, so on a whim, he picked up a box of cinnamon sugar and proceeded through the checkout line. You're not a diabetic, are you, Norman? The next morning, Norman was excited to try his new oatmeal. He woke up 10 minutes early and went straight to the kitchen. Norman emptied the packet into his bowl, added exactly 1 cup of milk, and heated the mixture in the microwave for 3 minutes. After letting it cool, he tried a spoonful. Oh, that is much better than the kind I've been eating, thought Norman. I'll certainly get this from now on. Sometimes trying new things can be good. Norman knew that he was going to have a pleasant Monday. I don't know if this is canon, Norman. I've not known Norman to like new things, but I mean, what kind of hairless ape are we if we're not eating sugar, right? Brain need to function. So yeah, while I'm skeptical that he actually liked it, that he stayed on the path and didn't buy the original as soon as he saw it at the store again, I am glad that Norman was able to enjoy something. Norman goes to the store to buy milk. Yeah, probably for the oatmeal. It was a beautiful morning outside. Norman had just woken up and went to make his morning cup of coffee. However, when he opened his fridge, he noticed that there was no milk left. Norman went outside to his car, got in, and drove to the supermarket. At the supermarket, Norman went to the milk aisle. He opened the refrigerator door, took out a carton of milk, and closed the door. He then went to the cashier to pay for this milk. Norman then went out to his car to drive back home. He made his coffee. The end. The message of this story? If you're ever making coffee and realize you don't have milk, driving to the supermarket is a good idea. I hate this stuff. Part of me gets what you're going at and sort of wants to love it for that, but overall, I think this is my least favorite Norman story ever. So congratulations, user Ariel MJD. Give me some spice. Give me some twists and turns. We'll see what happens in the next one. At least they're mercifully short, you know? Norman lifts something heavy. Oh yeah, bro, Gaines. Beefcake.
Follow your dreams. You can reach your goals. I'm living proof. Beefcake. Beefcake!
Norman was taking his 5-minute break at the water cooler again, hoping to strike up a conversation, when Lisa spotted him and called him over. I need to move this on top of my cabinet, she said, indicating a box on her desk. I can help with that, said Norman confidently. He was, after all, 2 whole inches taller than Lisa. He took a moment to unbutton his cuffs and neatly roll up his sleeves, and then he gripped the box handles. Careful, it's a bit heavy, said Lisa. I'll lift with my legs, Norman assured her, recalling the horror stories in a recent employee safety video. No, but for real, that stuff ain't no joke. Once your back is fucked, it's fucked. Norman bent at the knees and lifted. The box was indeed heavy, but not unmanageable. With a quiet grunt, he lifted it over his head and pushed it on top of the cabinet. Then Norman dusted his hands and turned to find that Lisa had been sitting on the edge of her desk, watching him keenly. Oh, Lisa and this will they, won't they? They will. They're going to. They have to, but Lisa has to make the first move. That's what I know. What is it? Norman asked. Oh, nothing, Lisa said, almost as breathless as he was. If there had been a body on the table, the moment would have reminded Norman of a romantic scene he'd recently been watching on CSI. Is there anything else I could help you with? He asked, his heart racing, as he worried that he was employing an unacceptable level of double entendre for the office. Is there anything I can help you with is like the lowest level of entendre. No, Lisa said with a slight smile. That was all I wanted. The excitement now over, Norman tipped an invisible hat. Don't do that. And left to return to his desk. He decided he would try for a conversation at the water cooler again tomorrow, and penciled it into his calendar. Oh God, that last part breaks my heart. Somebody go talk to him at the water cooler. Although he takes his lunch and avoids everybody else, so it's like, sort of no wonder nobody wants to talk with you even for the 5 minutes. It's called networking, Norman. You and I both, we need to work on that. We need to get there. It opens a lot of doors. Anyway, next one. Norman clicks his pen. Norman sat in traffic during his commute, listening to the radio, when a particularly catchy song started to play on said radio. Norman did not typically enjoy hip-hop, but this one was so gosh darn good. He could not help but bop his head to the beat. The commute seemed a little less dull now. Hours later, Norman sat at his cubicle, enjoying his 10-minute break. Norman held a pen idly in his hand, and he started to click the pen to the beat of the song. He smiled briefly, but then quickly stopped. I don't want to be a bother to anyone else, Norman said quietly to himself. Come on, enjoy yourself. Although enjoying oneself is what has gotten the world in the state that it's in, maybe we all need to have reservations and self-control like Norman. Maybe then we could return to a high-trust society. But that's a video for another day. We're moving on. Norman's best day ever. Ever? As Norman got to the front of the line, the cashier began to scan his groceries. Boop, boop, boop. The third beep had sent shockwaves down Norman's spine. He could not believe what he had just witnessed. No, this can't be, he thought to himself. This must be a mistake. However, Norman was not mistaken. What his eyes had witnessed was in fact the truth. The price of pickles had gone down by 15 cents. A momentous day indeed for Norman, one that he would certainly never forget. Oh, especially if it's those spicy pickles. My God, I want a pickle right now. Philippines always does these sweet pickles. I don't understand. But I do take a lot of solace in the fact that Norman probably eats the good pickles too. It's an important part of life and living. Pickles. Next one. 7 seconds left until the end of the fourth quarter. 6, 5. It's a 2-point game. 4, 3. It's Norman for the lead. 1. Norman threw it like his life depended on it. Alas, he missed the wide-open washing machine, and his dirty, rolled-up-in-a-ball socks fell a few inches short. Maybe next time, Norman murmured to himself sadly, picking up the dirty socks from the floor and gently placing them inside. Yeah, a little more practice. Also, don't ball your socks up like that because they're never going to get clean. I think that's pretty basic. Norman is way too fastidious to allow this. I feel like in my version of this story, he sinks the rolled up sock ball and then walks over to the washing machine and unrolls it. And then, yeah, he mutters something about how the socks will never get clean that way. Bing, bang, boom. I do like your take two, though, OP. Thanks for taking part in this story-building activity with us today. And you too, friends. If you haven't subscribed on the video yet, maybe you could, because maybe you're sticking around, and maybe you seem to enjoy some stuff we're doing here. Although Norman really is like quite a step apart from the usual stuff that we do. But that's why I like it. Little break. Norman gets a compliment. Norman sat immersed in a pile of paperwork. File after file beckoned to be checked and completed, so he worked on and on. His concentration broke when he heard a tap on the door. He looked up to see Lisa. Oh, how her sunny smile and glowing grace lit up the bleak walls of his cubicle. They exchanged hellos and discussed some work-related issue. While Norman explained some office technicalities to Lisa, her eyes wandered off to a small framed photo on Norman's desk. It was a photo of Norman holding Norman. Lisa exclaimed, "Oh, what a cute little kitty!" Norman smiled. "Yeah, that's Norman. And he happens to be my best buddy." Lisa said bye and left Norman to his paperwork and thoughts. When I get home today, I'll pass on Lisa's compliment to Norman. He'll be happy. I don't know if cats get all that worked up about compliments. He'd be like, she said you were a cute little kitty, and Cat's sitting there like, yeah, fuck, I know. Well, and what?
I don't know if I can stand the excitement.
Kinda gotta love cats for their attitude. Maybe Norman could take a page out of Norman's book, you know? Let us get into the next story. Norman gets tempted at work. Probably by Lisa, that temptress. Mondays at work are usually mundane for many people. However, for Norman, it's refreshing to get back into a routine after having 2 days away from the office. After lunch break, Norman notices his colleagues spinning on their chairs, laughing and having fun. He notices one guy almost fall off as the other colleague spun him around. One of Norman's colleagues asked Norman to join in and have a chair race. He toyed with the idea of joining in for a second, then quickly came to his senses and thought, this is not safe for work. He politely declined and continued with his day. Hey Norman, do you want to come over here and break free from the monotony of your everyday life? Nah, I think I'm good. I'm just gonna go back to my desk and work. What is it like to be Norman? There are some things I love and some things that terrify me, like that. That interaction is terrifying to me. They probably only invited him because they think one day he's going to come with a Kalashnikov to work. But anywho, Norman treats himself. Again, dude? That's where the diabetes is coming from, I'm gonna tell you right now. Norman was having a bad day. His bus passed him by, so he was late to work. The coffee machine at the office wouldn't work, and he felt too embarrassed to ask anyone else for help in fixing it. What if it was something simple, and he ended up looking foolish? In the afternoon, Norman decided that he would treat himself to a nice dinner. After all, it was a Friday, and was there any better way to perk up his day? He decided to go to his local pizzeria at exactly 6:08. Wouldn't want to be early and look like an old man or something like that. And Norman didn't want to be too late and be stuck in the rush with nothing to do as he waited for his food. I mean, to be fair, 6 p.m. is about right. He was so excited at the thought of this new development that he even let it slip to Lisa when she asked if he had any weekend plans. On his way out the door, 6:03, Norman thought of what he would order. He figured he would get his usual cheese pizza, but as he got closer, he thought, I am treating myself. Maybe I'll throw caution to the wind. I'll even be a little bit cheeky and tell the waiter to surprise me. Do waiters enjoy that? Do customers actually do that? I would think Norman would be way too neurotic to actually do that. Norman got to the restaurant, and through the glass he could see his son sitting there at a table for two. Norman couldn't believe his eyes. His son hadn't even told him that he was in town. A surprise. Maybe he called the office and Lisa had told him where Norman would be tonight. Normally, Norman didn't much like surprises, but the sight of his son soon eradicated any sense of anxiety he felt. As Norman was about to open the door and go greet his son, a young, pretty brunette girl sat down in the open spot. Norman didn't want to be a bother, so he went home and ordered the cheese pizza to be delivered instead. He would be adventurous on another night. Damn, this one cuts me. Why would you name it Treats Himself? This is heartbreaking. Poor Norman. Norman's son has got to be the hardest part of reading these stories. Every time he's mentioned, I just get cut so deep. And this one blindsided me because I thought it was going to end nice. Damn it.
You got me now. You got me now.
Oh well, we'll try again in the next one. Here we go. Norman makes a typo. Yes, I also make typos. One fine Sunday, Lisa, Norman's coworker, organized a Christmas party at the office. At the 11th hour, however, Lisa realized that there weren't enough chocolates for the whole crew. Reliable that Norman is, Lisa decided to text him, asking if he had any at his place. I'll go check my panty, Norman texted back, followed by a 300-word text explaining the mistake. Yeah, it's like when you ask the wife if she wants you to pick up any barbecue chicken and you text her barbecue children. Well, Norman got through the party, avoiding eye contact with Lisa through the entire blasted ordeal. Just as he was about to leave, Lisa stopped him in his tracks. Thank you so much, Norman, she said, hugging him. You're a savior. Oh, it was really nothing, Norman replied politely, and walked away with a smile on his face all the way home. Yeah, she knew what he meant. He meant to say pantry. What I think is weird is that his predictive text has decided that panty is something that Norman types often enough for his predictive text to be like, yeah, you meant this instead of party, right? Or pantry. I guess I don't type pantry that often either. Whatever. Glad you had a good Christmas, Norman. And I'm glad Lisa could just let that one go. There's no need to make it more awkward. Anyway, let's see where else we're headed. Norman thinks of her at 3:24 a.m. It's gonna be another sad one, isn't it? You're gonna rip my heart out, ain't you? Norman wakes suddenly, breath sharply filling his lungs. He glances at the clock. 3:24 a.m. He rearranges his body into a comfortable position and snuggles tightly into the blankets. He begins to recall bits of his dreams. It was of her again. He knows allowing himself to indulge in thoughts of her and their life together ultimately makes everything else unbearable, but Norman is weak. Norman closes his eyes and lets his mind drift to her. Shared laughter, moments of joy, moments of struggle. Norman sifts through it all, happily and sorrowfully. Norman winces as a wave of pure desire and longing surge through his body. Norman grabs his headphones and finds that song he loves, the one that she showed him. It reminds him of her presence. He listens over and over again. In his mind, he's embracing her. Norman drifts back to sleep. I don't know how this one's that far down the list. This is outstanding. A little bit sad, but very human. And I think that's the thing that we all like most about Norman. Although you want a quick and easy fix, just print her face on a pillow. Seems to work for waifus. See that? See how I just take that heartfelt moment and crap all over it? Nice. And we're moving on. Norman sneezes. As Norman rode the tram, a young and pretty woman sat across from him. Why don't I have the courage to talk to her? Norman asked himself. He wished he didn't ask that question because a lot of reasons came to mind. Norman sneezed. Part of him wished that the sneeze would get her attention, but unfortunately, nothing came of it. A minute later, the young woman sneezed. Bless you, a younger, more handsome man said to her. Why didn't I get a bless you? Because you're a dude, Norman. Norman felt offended. However, it might have just been a misunderstanding. Perhaps the young man missed Norman's sneeze and forgot to bless him too. Norman decided to test that by giving a louder, more obvious sneeze. The young man turned to Norman, and Norman's heart started to race. You should cover your mouth when you sneeze, he said to Norman. Norman nodded and agreed. Truth is, he was terribly embarrassed. What would the pretty woman think now? Yeah, I don't think that really gets to be any of your concern, Norman. Somebody else is moving in. It's all over but the crying. A moment later, the young man sneezed. Norman enacted his revenge by saying nothing. He felt petty and accomplished. Let's see how this young man likes it, going about unblessed. Bless you, the pretty woman said. Norman sulked. Damn. It truly is a hard knock life, isn't it? Some people get all the luck, but notice how Norman's not ranting about Chads and Stacy's, even still. Next one. Norman questions his choice of milk. I mean, there's so many options. You got different animals and percentages, and then people started squeezing nuts and getting milk out of them.
That's what I love.
These nuts.
I stay away from the nut milk, personally. All right. 2% or 3? Norman pondered the question, a carton of milk in each hand. The percentage points were for fat. Norman adored the taste of 3%. It reminded him of his youth, when he didn't have to count calories or consider carbs. To be young again. To taste 3%. But Norman had put on weight these past few weeks. Dare he risk his waistline further? What would his neighbors think should they see him coming home with new, larger pants? I think the main concern is, why do the neighbors know the size of my pants? Looking good, Norman, remarked Bess, the gray-haired and elderly lady who lived across the street. Norman glanced over and waved. It looks like he wasn't the only one who did his groceries at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. 3% it is, thought Norman with a smile. Yeah, Bess ain't here to judge you. Her name's Bess, for God's sake. That's not a name for a person, that's a name for a cow. But Norman don't judge nobody. I think that's beautiful. I'm starting to crack myself up. Still gotta get a few more in there. Let's move along. Norman meets the new guy at the office. His name is Party Demon. Whoa! Today was quite an exciting day for Norman. It was the first day for the new employee, Robert. Norman thoroughly enjoyed having somebody new join the company. It made him feel as if he were in the right place to be. kind of strange. Yeah, we hired somebody. That means it's meant for me. I'm pretty sure every company hires people. Weirdest flex, but okay. Norman had been with the company for quite some time, therefore he was familiar with the addition of new personnel. Generally, Norman would greet his new peers with a handshake, his name, and some weather talk. Norman read in a book that people liked other people that were funny. Well, Norman wasn't typically the funny type, but he wanted to make friends other than Norman, so all morning he pondered a joke, and when finding one, he locked it in his mind so as not to forget. I'd love to hear a Norman joke. I bet he fucking kills and just has no idea how. As Norman arrived at his desk, he placed his briefcase bottom down and sat in his chair. He saw a crowd corralled around Robert's desk, laughing and making conversation. After 23 minutes, the crowd dispersed and Norman made his way. With butterflies in his stomach and a smirk on his face, Norman walked up to Robert's desk and said, "It's a nice day outside, isn't it?" Norman knew fully well that the weather outside was gloomy and not nice at all. Robert kept at his computer, not hearing or noticing Norman directly to his left. Norman waited for a response and gradually realized that Robert had not heard him. Norman's smile faded as his eyes drew to the ground and he receded back to his desk. Yeah, dude, your window was in like the 23 minutes where everybody was crowded over there. Now he's shifted back into work mode. I wouldn't feel too bad about it. There's always tomorrow. Who really wants to get to know their coworkers anyways? Next story. Oh, this is a Robert story. Robert makes a new friend. There was a new employee at Norman's office named Robert, and Norman was determined to befriend him. He remembered his first days at the office and how he had felt isolated from his coworkers, and he didn't want Robert to go through that same experience. Though disheartened that his first attempt at contact hadn't been successful, Norman decided that he would try again before he left for the day. At precisely 5 o'clock, Norman closed down all of his projects to save for the day. He decided to take the long way around the office to the parking garage so that he could stop by Robert's cubicle and say hello on his way out. As he rounded the corner of the building, he saw Lisa standing in the entrance to Robert's cubicle. "Aw, say they so Lisa, you whore!" She was casually leaning against the wall and playing with a strand of her hair. Robert laughed heartily at something she had said. Norman turned around and decided to take the other path. He didn't want to disturb them. Norman felt a funny feeling in his stomach that he couldn't quite identify. Maybe he had eaten something that didn't agree with him. He reached the parking garage and climbed into his Geo Metro. He does drive a Geo Metro, doesn't he? Has it been mentioned before? Did it tickle me that much the first time? Norman started driving home in silence, and indeed, the weather seemed much gloomier now. I can't quite place my finger on Robert. Like, it's all painted through Norman's frame of reference, so a big part of me wants to hate him, but what has he really done wrong? Got to know some people at the office. Lisa started flirting. Lisa flirts with everybody, okay? If she was a man, HR would have a field day. I guess we'll see how the Robert thing develops a bit later on, but for now, something unrelated. Norman has a visitor. Is it his son? Please, God, say it's his son. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and Norman was sitting in his recliner watching TV with Norman when he heard the doorbell ring. He got up and went to the door. When he opened it, Norman was surprised to see a handful of neighborhood kids on his stoop. They were all wearing dirty baseball caps and had baseball gloves. "Hey, mister, we're real sorry, but our baseball landed in your backyard. You think we could have it back?" Norman appreciated the young man's politeness. "Sure, let's go around the back." Norman stepped outside, closed the front door, and led the group of kids around to his backyard. When they got there, they began looking around for the baseball. They shortly found it inside Norman's bird bath, floating in the water. "Oh man, it's all waterlogged," exclaimed one of the kids. "Well, thanks anyway, mister." "Can you not use a baseball if it gets wet?" "I think it's fine. Go fucking knock it around until it dries out." These kids are snooty. Norman felt bad for the children, however. He suddenly remembered something. "Hey, wait here for a minute, kids," he told them as he made his way back into his house. He headed for the storage area in his basement. Norman was a very organized man, and he knew exactly where to find what it was he was looking for. He pulled out an old cardboard box, and there it was, the baseball that he and Norman Jr. used to play catch with when Norman Jr. was much younger. It was a little dirty and smudged, but still in great shape. Norman went back outside and gave the baseball to the youngsters. "Here you go, kids. Have fun." "Wow, gee, thanks, mister," the kids exclaimed as they ran away. In that moment, the kids reminded Norman of Norman Jr. Norman watched them go with half a smile on his face. Yeah, some real mixed emotions there, but hey, at least you're letting go of things that don't truly matter. There's some memories contained in that, yes, but the memories are also up in your brain, so don't worry about it too much. You're getting attached to stuff. The more of it you let go, the happier you'll be. But as usual, I don't think Norman would ever go the full 9. It's too much change. Change does not spark joy. Next post. Norman's heist. Ooh, sounds high stakes. Norman sat at his desk, quietly eating his turkey sandwich. He was still on break for another 5 minutes, but he would probably just donate the last 2 to the company. All of a sudden, Norman's phone rang. Norman hastily swallowed his last bite and picked up the phone. "Hello?" Norman asked. "Hi, Norman. This is Sarah from HR. I have a form I need you to sign real quick, so can you head over to my office?" Sarah said. "Sure The dial tone interrupted Norman. "Ooh, Sarah. She's a real piece of work, you know." First time I've ever heard of this character. Norman got up from his cubicle and walked next door to Sarah's office. Sarah was on her cell phone when Norman entered. She pointed at the form on her desk, then turned around to talk while looking out the window. Norman went over to the desk. He reached into his pocket for a pen, but unfortunately didn't find one. Rather than go back to his desk, Norman just used a pen that was next to the form. The way the pen glided when he wrote on the form impressed Norman. This was an extremely efficient pen. He noticed that Sarah had a dozen more in the cup on her desk. He considered asking Sarah about where she got the pen, but he didn't want to interrupt her phone conversation. Norman then considered the worst. When he got home, Norman guiltily confessed to Norman about his thoughts about that pen and vowed that he would never consider doing anything so sinister ever again. Oh, Norman, you really are just too pure for this world. I would have been like, I don't know, she deserves it. She deserves it, and also I want this pen, so I'm taking it. I think most people would go along with those thoughts, but not Norman, man. He's a different breed. Next post. Norman treats himself. My God, so many treats. We're gonna have to take your foot, Norman. The diabetes, it's too much. Whilst returning to the office, Norman decided to treat himself. He seems to do that an awful lot lately. He's sort of seeming self-indulgent, if you want me to be real honest. Maybe he's really going through something. Perhaps he would have a candy bar or a bar of chocolate. He hadn't had a Twix in a long time. Do they still even sell those? He wondered to himself. Who's out here eating Twix for real? You need to bite into a nice Charleston chew. Now that's a real candy. You whippersnappers. Back in my day, we didn't have all these fancy schmancy candy bars with their caramels and their nougats and whatnot. No, sir. We had a delicious Charleston chew, and it was the bee's knees. Excuse me, Grandpa ReddX, isn't Charleston chew mostly nougat? You shut your whore mouth! Delicious chocolate mixed with creamy, luscious vanilla or chocolate nougat. Oh, it's a match made in heaven. Snickers and Twix are both bullshit. Stuffing your candy bar with peanuts and cookies, it's just plain dishonest is what it is. No, sir. Charleston Chew doesn't need any gimmicks to be the best. And without a doubt, it's the most versatile candy bar on the market. You can freeze it and shatter it or microwave it to strangle your ex-wife. You can do all sorts of things. It's like the Swiss Army knife of candy bars. You kids, you just don't know. If any food has more than 2 ingredients, then it's unpure. Chocolate and nougat. That's all you need. Okay, Grandpa, lay down. It's nap time. But yes, as Norman found out, they did still sell Twix. And upon completion of his purchase, Norman continued walking back to the office. He had originally intended to wait until he was back at his desk before enjoying his treat, but Norman was overwhelmed with the anticipation of his 2 fingers of chocolate-covered biscuits and caramel. With reckless abandon, he tore at the packaging, only to watch helplessly as the left finger fell onto the dusty ground. Oh well. Still got half a Twix, exclaimed Norman in an effort to reassure himself. Norman, 5-second rule, Norman! It's too late. He didn't do it. But yeah, with the diabetes and all, probably half a Twix is all you should have. It might not seem like it's for the best right now, but trust me, it's for the best. Next story! Norman waits for the bus. Norman sat at the bus stop, wondering where the bus was. It was supposed to arrive at 8:05. It was 8:02. This made Norman anxious. A car pulled up to the stop and rolled down its window. A young man inside smiled and waved hello. Oh God, it's Elliot Rodger. Run, Norman, he's gonna throw coffee on you. You should check out that manifesto on the channel if you haven't yet. It's such a vibe shift. Norman smiled back and began to say hello to the man. A man next to him walked to the car to greet his friend. They both looked at Norman disapprovingly. Norman started taking a different bus to work. Man, fuck both of them. Like I'm the weirdo for wanting to make a human connection. I was trying to be courteous, you douche. Try it out. But that's way too confrontational for Norman. Never gonna happen. Oh well, I hope the new bus treats you better, buddy. Next post. Norman dips into his rainy day fund. Do it, Norman. Squander it. Squander it all! Norman had just finished washing the last dish when his landline started to ring. He was pleased at how polite the caller was to be calling at such a reasonable hour. He dried his hands quickly and picked up the receiver. The considerate caller turned out to be Norman Jr. He was receiving an award at university and was wondering if Norman could perhaps be able to make it to the ceremony in only a fortnight's time. Norman said he wouldn't miss it for the world. He would use his rainy day fund. He would take time off work. He would think about that phone call often as he counted down the days. When travel day finally came, Norman was apprehensive as he buckled himself into his airplane seat. He was feeling a number of emotions, but as the plane took off, more than anything else, he was feeling hopeful. Maybe this would be the fresh start that he and his son needed to find their way back into each other's lives. Yeah, maybe. Hope floats. I mean, the end of college is basically the beginning of adult life, and that's the point where you have to start paying for all your own crap, and you realize, like, wow, my parents did all this for me? Maybe I should give them a call sometime. Let them know that I love them and appreciate it. It was easier back then, sure. But easier is still pretty goddamn hard, as far as I could tell. Anyway, a couple more stories. Norman wins $1 million. Oh my god, it's really happening for us. Yeah, sorta, whatever. It was 11:52 a.m., and Norman was just working through another humdrum day at the office. As he was assembling some more spreadsheets, Norman received an email notification. You've just won $1 million. Click here to claim your prize. Norman hesitantly clicked to open the email. Oh no, don't do it.
Yeah, that sounds like a scam.
He wanted to relish in the moment, for this much adrenaline was rare for him to experience. Wearing a prim smile, Norman finally read the email. Hello, sir. Please give credit card information to hotwire money to bank. Now, Norman wasn't too computer fancy, but he intuitively knew that this was too good to be true. He dismissed the email and returned to work. Now that's good OPSEC. A looming tinge of morosity hit Norman after such an emotional ordeal, and he had to fill this void by looking forward to something else. Perhaps I'll get Norman a special treat on my way home today, Norman contentedly thought to himself. This was good enough. Norman resumed his humdrum day at the office. You know what they say, man? More money, more problems. You don't need none of that, Norman. Make enough to skate through life, and that should be just fine. Next one. Norman gets Instagram. Norman had heard about Instagram quite a few times around the office, but it never really interested him all that much. He always preferred his photos in a physical form, stored in a shoebox in the closet. One day, however, he overheard the new girl at work, Jessica, as she was talking about how all the kids these days are on the Instagram and that it's quote-unquote really fun. Yes, if you enjoy doom scrolling to increase your depression, why not?
I deliberately entered a thread full of things that I do not like.
Norman decided that he should try to get more in touch with his youth and made a note in his calendar to create an Instagram account on Sunday after lunch. When Sunday came around, Norman downloaded Instagram on his phone and created himself an account. He decided that he should also post a photo of himself as a way to celebrate his newfound hobby. Hobby? Oh God, let's hope it doesn't become that. I'm about to lose a ton of respect for you, Norman. Norman pulled out his finest suit, shaved his face, brushed his hair, and proceeded to take one of those selfies he had heard so much about. He posted it on his page and captioned it, "This is my first photo on Instagram. Hopefully more will follow." He then closed the app and felt that a well-deserved nap was in order after all that effort. Norman cuddled up next to Norman in bed, and they both hit the hay. A few hours later, Norman's alarm rang, waking him up from his slumber. He got up and reached for his phone to see if there was any activity on his Instagram. To his surprise, he had one alert. He eagerly pressed his notifications button, and it read, "Welcome to Instagram. Find friends to follow by adding your phone number." Norman decided that this level of fame was far too much for him, and he proceeded to delete Instagram. That's the happiest ending I can imagine, honestly. Huge bullet dodge just now. Seems like we always make good decisions after a slumber, and I'm about due for one right now, friends, so thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Like, comment, sub if you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much to my Patreon patrons, my YouTube channel members. You guys, for real, I can't do it without you. If you can sign up, I appreciate it. If not, don't sweat it. I just want you to remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you definitely deserve it, and I shall see you in the next one. So until then, bye-bye. Go ahead and cut them open. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine.